Bismillah, wassalatu wassalamu ala rasulillah. Rabbi shrah li sadri wa yassir li amri wahlul uqdatan min lisani yafqahu qawli. Rabbi yassir wa la tu'assir wa tammim bil khair. Al-Jumlatul Fi'liyah, verbal sentence. So inshallah today we will learn more about the verbal sentence as we are going to start lesson number 5 of book 2 and now, inshallah, our journey for learning Arabic verbs has already started. And now, inshallah, we will proceed further. Verbal sentence always starts with a verb. As we know that there are only two types of sentences. Al-Jumlatul Ismiyah, that always starts with a noun. And Al-Jumlatul Fi'liyah, that always starts with a verb. It consists of two parts. There must be minimum two parts. There can be more than two, but there should be at least two parts, that is al-fi'l, that is the verb, and al-fa'il, that is the doer of the action. Now, if you remember about al-jumlatul fi'liyah, al-ismiyah, we have seen that also consists of two parts, which is the subject, mubtada'un, and predicate, that is khabarun. And similarly, jumla fi'liyah, that is a verbal sentence, it also consists of two parts. One is the fi'l and the other is the fa'il. It cannot be complete without the verb and the doer. The doer is always marfu' and the doer of the action is always marfu'. As we know that the action cannot happen by itself, there has to be someone to perform that action. And the performer of the action is called al-fa'il, and al-fa'il is always marfu'. That means always in halat rafi'. For example, we have here the sentence dhahaba bilalun. It's a basic verbal sentence where we can see that dhahaba is a verb and bilalun is a noun, that is basically the doer of the action. So we will say that dhahaba is al-fi'l and bilalun is al-fa'il, the doer of the action. And also we can see that bilal is marfu' because the doer of the action is always marfu'. So this is something that we need to know, that the verbal sentence always starts with the verb. And similarly, the doer of the action is always marfu'. It will be in halat rafi'. Either it comes with dammatan or with damma. It depends. Sometimes verbal sentence consists of three parts or maybe more than three parts. It can be al-fi'l, that is the verb. Then al-fa'il, that is the doer of the action. And we have learned that al-fa'il is always marfu'. And then we have the object, and this is called the direct object. Al-maf'ul bihi, the direct object, and this is the receiver of the action, and the receiver of the action is always mansub. So now we have fi'l, that is the verb, then we have the fa'il, the doer of the action, that is always marfu', and then we have al-maf'ul bihi, and please remember we call it direct object because there are different types of objects, and the first one that we are learning is the direct object, and that is called al-maf'ul bihi, and this is called the receiver of the action. For example, we have here khalaqallahu al-arda. So now we can see over here Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala created the earth. Now we can see that khalaqa is the verb, of course, fi'l, and ismul jalala is or in fact Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is the creator. So we will say Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is the creator, but we will say ismul jalala is al-fa'il, and al-ard is al-maf'ul bihi. So now all the conditions have been met, that the sentence starts with the verb, and then the doer is always marfu', and the receiver of the action is always mansub. So all the three things that we can see over here. So here, khalaqallahu al-arda, we have a complete verbal sentence which consists of the subject, the verb, and the object. Okay, what about the attached pronouns? The attached pronouns always come as an object in a verbal sentence. So whenever they are used in a verbal sentence or whenever they are connected to a verb, they will always be object, the attached pronouns. Here we don't have the attached pronoun. Here we have the regular sentence. Khalaqal insana. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala created insan. Now, after the verb, if you see that the noun is mansub, what does that mean? That means the inbuilt doer will be activated. So here we need to be very careful. After the first form of the verb, that is khalaqa, and similarly the fourth form of the verb, that will be khalaqat. After the first form of the verb and the fourth form of the verb, the noun can be mansub and the noun can be marfu'. It can be mansub or it can be marfu'. It is only restricted to 1 and 4. The rest of the forms of the verb, that are the rest of the 8 forms of the verb, or in fact 10, the rest of the 10, the noun will always be mansub. The noun will always be mansub. But after 1 and 4, the noun can be marfu' and the noun can be mansub. Whenever you see that the noun is mansub, it has fatha, that means the inbuilt doer, which is he inside it, is activated. So when we say khalaqa al-insana, of course it refers to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, but we didn't say khalaqa Allahu al-insana. The sentence says khalaqa al-insana, and it will be he created man. And here we can see that this is also a verbal sentence. So here we need to be very careful. Khalaqa al-insana. Like we have allamahu al-bayan. So you will see that when you see Surah Rahman and you see the verses of Surah Rahman, you will see that the noun is always mansub because the creator is Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Okay, now here we have khalaqal insana, and here we have the attached pronoun, which basically replaces al-insan, and it becomes khalaqahu. Now we can see that insan has been replaced with the attached pronoun, and now we can see that the attached pronoun is mansub. Of course, the ending will not change because the attached pronouns are mabni, but we can see that they are, here it is the receiver of the action. So whenever the attached pronouns, they are used with the verb, they will always be mansub. As we can see over here, khalaqa plus hu, so it's the combination of khalaqa plus hu, and we will say that khalaqa is the doer and the verb, yani the inbuilt doer and the verb, and hu is the object, that is the receiver of the action. So once again, let me repeat that the attached pronouns, whenever they are attached to a verb, they will always be the object of the action, or they will be the object in the sentence. So here, alhamdulillah, now we can see that the attached pronoun is the receiver of the action. This is the object. So khalaqa, here we have the inbuilt doer, he, and then we have the verb, which is khalaqa, and then we have hu, that is the object of the action, the receiver of the action. Now we have learned isnadu dhahaba. Just for your reminder once again, you can see over here that the past tense always starts with the third person singular. As we can see over here, it starts with dhahaba. And what I want to highlight over here is number 1 and number 4. Now, if you remember, starting from book number 1, I told you that number 1 and 4, one day, inshallah, we will come to know that why we put the numbers. And today the time has come that we will come to know why we have used these numbers, number 1 and number 4. So why we have number 1 and number 4? Because number 1 is the first form of the verb. Then dhahaba is number 2, dhahabu is number 3, dhahabat is 4, dhahabata is 5, dhahabna is 6, and all the way unto dhahabna, that will be 14. So each verb, whether it's the past tense or the present tense, it will consist of 14 forms. And now we will learn about form number 1 and form number 4. When the doer is apparent, when the doer is outside, to make it easier, when the doer is apparent or when the doer is outside, then the verbal sentence will start with the first, or which is the first form, which is dhahaba, or the fourth form, which is dhahabat of the verb. So whenever the doer is apparent, whenever the doer is outside, for masculine, now we can see masculine, the sentence will always start with dhahaba, that is the first form of the verb. So now, for example, we have one student, so we said dhahaba at-talibu ila al-madrasati. The student went to the school, and we know that we are talking about masculine student, right? Because we have masculine over here. Now, what if we have two students? What will we say? For the two students, we will also say ذهب. ذهب الطالبان إلى المدرسة. Two masculine students went to the school. Okay, what if we have more than two students and they are masculine? We will say ذهب الطلاب إلى المدرسة. So this is the most beautiful, you can say part of the verbal sentence, where we can see that when the doer is apparent, when the doer is outside, when the doer is ظاهر, then the verb for the singular, for the dual, and for the masculine will be used ذهب. And ذهب is in the case where we are using the verb ذهب. It can be any other verb, for example, jalasa, whatever we have learned, qatala, sa'ala, daraba, nasara, all the verbs. So whenever the doer is apparent and the doer is always fa'il, then it will be marfu. And also for the singular verb, for the singular doer, for the dual doer, and for the plural doer, the verb will be used is only the third person singular, which is ذهب. And when we talk about the feminine, al-mu'annath, now we will use, here we have used form number 1, and here we will use form number 4, which is ذهبت. And we know that ذهبت, the ending is sakin. However, when we connect it with al, then we know we have to connect it with kasra, so it will be ذهبت الطالبة إلى المدرسة. And the feminine student, the female student went to the school. Now, what if we have two? طالبتان. So what will we say? We will say ذهبت الطالبتان إلى المدرسة. Two female students went to the school. What if we have طالبات? We have more than two. We will use the same. We will say ذهبت الطالبات إلى المدرسة. All feminine students went to the school. So we have to make it feminine. All feminine students went to the school. So now this is the most important, you can say, rule of the verbal sentence, that whenever the doer is apparent, whenever the doer is outside, and when the doer is masculine, we will use the first form of the verb. And when the doer is feminine, then we will use the fourth form of the verb. Is this clear now? Does it make sense to you? Like, why did we put number 1 and number 4? I hope, inshallah, now it's very clear to you. Okay, now, as a student, you might be thinking like, why do we have to use only dhahaba? Why do we not change the verb? And to answer this question, we will see over here. Note that dhahaba tullabu, the students went. The verb zahaba has no waw. For example, it's not dhahabu. And the reason why there is no dhahabu means they went. Dhahabu means they went. And if we say dhahabu at-tullabu, it means they, the students went. So they, the students went. Does it make any sense in English? It doesn't make any sense in English. So why would it make any sense in Arabic? So that's why this is not correct, because there cannot be two files for a verb. There cannot be two files for a verb. Why? Because in dhahabu, there is inbuilt doer, that means hum. And at-tullabu is also the doer. And it's not possible to have two doers in one verbal sentence. That's why whenever you start a verbal sentence and the doer is apparent, the doer is outside, whether the doer is singular or doer or plural, we have to use the verb that is the singular, that will be dhahaba. So now that's the answer to your question, that we cannot use two files or the two doers together. However, if it's a verbal sentence, if it's a nominal sentence, if it's a jumla ismiya, then it's a different case. We know in jumla ismiya, the subject and the predicate are equal, right? So we can say at-tullabu dhahabu. And now we will say that at-tullabu is mubtada and dhahabu is khabar. Or we will say at-tullabu is the subject and dhahabu is the predicate. And if you remember, I told you in book number 1 that the verb can be the predicate. It's possible to be the predicate. And the reason why it can be the predicate is because we know that generally subject and predicate are nouns. So the ulama or the grammarians, they say that hum, the hidden damir inside it, basically that is the predicate, that is the khabar. However, we should know that when you are using a verbal sentence, then the verb should follow the noun. Again, let me repeat, the verb should follow the noun. If we have one student, at-talibu, we will say at-talibu dhahaba. If we have two students, we will say at-talibani dhahaba. And if we have more than two students, we will say at-tullabu dhahabu. Now, here you have to run the conjugation. If the subject changes, the predicate will change. And if you have memorized the conjugation, and then the conjugation will go accordingly. And now you can do this here, that you can put one you can put one noun here, and you can put one verb over here, and you can make nominal sentences. But for the verbal sentences, we have to use only this formula. We cannot change it. And the same goes to the feminine. We will say dhahabatil banatu, the girls went. But if you want to make it a nominal sentence, then you will say al banatu dhahabna. So we will say al bintu dhahabat, al bintani dhahabatani, and al banatu dhahabna. Now look at the nominal sentence first. This is the nominal sentence. At-tullabu dhahabu. But the verbal sentence, it will be dhahabat tullabu. And similarly, we say at-talibatu dhahabna. But in the verbal sentence, we will say dhahabat at-talibatu. In other words, in the verbal sentence, we will only use dhahaba and dhahabat. But in the nominal sentence, the verb will change according to the noun. The verb will change according to the noun. If the noun is singular, the verb will be singular. If the noun is dual, the verb will be dual. And if the noun is plural, the verb will be plural. So inshallah, I hope it's clear now. And this is the difference between the verbal sentence and the nominal sentence, jumla ismiya and jumla fi'liya. Inshallah, I hope it's clear now. Any questions? Okay, al-maf'ul bihi, as I told you, that the object of the sentence al-maf'ul bihi is always mansub. For example, we say fatah al-waladu al-baba. Fatah al-waladu al-baba. The boy opened the door. So fataha is the verb, al-waladu is marfu, and we can see that this is the fa'il, and al-baba is the maf'ul. That means this is the object, and the object is always mansub. Okay, similarly, if you remember, I mentioned in the beginning of the lesson, except for form number 1 and form number 4, the verb, when we use the verb, it could be like ra'aytu, ra'ayna, any of the verbs. Then the noun that comes after it will always be mansub. After number 1 and number 4, we have seen that the noun can be marfu' and the noun can be mansub, right? Both it can be. But the rest of the forms of the verb, the noun will always be mansub. It will always be mansub. When you say ra'aytu hamidan, basically the sentence is ana ra'aytu hamidan, because ana is inbuilt inside it. So you will say tu is the doer basically. So the tu is the doer, and ra'a is the verb, and ra'aytu hamidan, I saw Hamid. So we will say ra'aytu is fail plus file, and hamidan is maf'ul bihi. Sa'alatil mudiratu Zainaba. The headmistress asked Zainab, and now we can see that al-mudiratu is the doer. It is marfu, and Zainaba is mansub, the receiver of the action. That's why it has fatha on it. Shariba rajulu al-ma'a. Similarly, shariba is the verb, ar-rajulu is the doer, and al-ma'a is the object, the receiver of the action. The maf'ul bihi can be a pronoun, and if you remember, I told you that the pronoun will always be used as the object. For example, you say ra'aytu bilalan, I saw Bilal, wasa'altu, and I asked who? Him. So here the attached pronoun is the object. So whenever the attached pronoun comes with the verb, it will always be the object. It will always be the receiver of the action. It cannot be the doer of the action. I saw Bilal and I asked him. Now here's something which we may not observe, or which we may not need when we talk about modern standard Arabic, but this is something that is very, very important when we are reciting the Quran, or with respect to the tajweed. This rule is very, very important. And what is the rule? The rule is very simple. Whenever we have a noun that ends with tanween, that ends with tanween. And after that, the next word starts with Hamzatul Wasl. You know Hamzatul Wasl, right? The connecting Hamza. So when we pronounce it, we will pronounce it with a different pronunciation. First, look at the sentence. Shariba Hamidun al-ma'a. Shariba Hamidun al-ma'a. Okay, now Hamidun ends with Noon Sakin, right? Hamidun ends with what? Noon Sakin, because you know that tanween means Noon Sakin. So Noon Sakin, Noon is Sakin, and Hamzatul Wasl is Sakin. When we have two Sakin letters, it's not possible to read them. This is called iltaqa sakinain. In Arabic language, two Sakin letters cannot happen together. So in order to read it, we will have to insert a small noon, and the noon will always be read with kasra, a small noon, and it will always be read with kasra. So it will be Shariba Hamidu Nilma'a. As you can see over here, Shariba Hamidu Nilma'a. So here you can see Hamid is the doer and Alma is the receiver of the action, that is the object. But the rule that is, so you will not hear any Arab saying like that. Shariba Bilalu Nilma'a. That may not happen in the modern standard Arabic. But in the Quran, we have to observe this rule. Similarly, we say Sa'ala Bilalun ibnahu. So we will say Sa'ala Bilalu nibnahu. Now the noon will be added, and this is called Noon Qutni. That's a small noon, and it has a name as well. So it is called Noon Qutni, and it is always read with kasra. You cannot read it with fatha or dhamma. The noun can end with dhammatan, it can end with fathatan, it can end with kasratan. That's not a problem. But this noon will always be read with kasra. So we will say Sa'ala is the verb, Bilal is the doer of the action, and ibnahu is the receiver of the action. So we will say Sa'ala Bilalu nibnahu. Bilal asked his son. And similarly, Samiya Faisalun al-adhana, and we will say Samiya Faisalu nil adhana. Samiya Faisalu nil adhana. Faisal heard the adhan. So we will say Samiya is the verb, and Faisal is the doer, which is the subject, and al-adhana is the object, that is the receiver of the action. Now let's look at some of the examples from the Quran. So this is Mushaf al-Madinah. In Mushaf al-Madinah, in case you are living in the subcontinent or in South Africa, then you will find this Mushaf. And please remember that in Mushaf al-Madinah, al-Mushaf al-Uthmani, the noon is not added over there. So you can only read it in the right way if you know this rule, because we know the Hamza of Ibn is Hamzatul Wasl. So how do we read it? Nuhu nibnahu. Now, if you're reciting the Mus'haf that is used in Indo-Pak, you will see that a noon is added to that. But the Mus'haf that we have in Saudi Arabia or any other of the Middle Eastern countries, that noon is not added, and that means they expect you to know this rule, and that's why you will read it Nuhu nibnahu. So that's very, very important when it comes to the Quran. So here Nuhun has dhammatan. It is marfu. It can be, as we can see over here, khayran. So here it is mansub. And what will happen now? We will have to add noon with kasra. So it will become khayranil wasiyah. Khayranil wasiyatu. So now we can see over here that the Mus'haf that we have in Indo-Pak, like in India or Pakistan or any other of these countries, it will be Khayran al-Wasiyah. And the Mus'haf that we have in the Middle East or the Mus'haf al-Uthmani, then you will not see this noon added to that. So we need to be very careful. It is mansub. So we will read only one fatha, Khayra nil wasiyah. And similarly, we have here, we have lumazatin. And after that, we have alladhi, and we can see that the Hamza of alladhi is Hamzatul Wasl. Now, if we stop, we will recite it, wailul likulli humazatil lumazah, right? When we stop. But if we don't stop and you want to continue, then how will you continue? You will continue it lumazatin illadhi. So here we have only one kasra, and then we add noon to that in the pronunciation, and we will read it like this. So Dhamma will be recited as Dhamma, Fatha will be recited as Fatha, Kasra will be recited as Kasra, but the noon will always be recited with kasra, as we can see over here. Nuhun ibnahu khayran al-wasiyah or khayran al-wasiyatu and lumazatin alladhi. And this is a very, very important rule which regard to the tajweed as well. And inshallah, I hope it's clear now. In the introduction of the verb, we have learned that the verb consists of, mainly it consists of 3 radicals or 3 root letters. And we have learned that when we talk about the past tense, in the past tense, the first letter and the last letter, they are always fixed, and they are fixed with fatha. We call them mabniyun al-fath. But when we talk about the second radical, or when we talk about the second root letter, then it can have fatha, it can have dhamma, and it can have kasra. There are 3 possibilities. And we can see some more examples over here. Or for example, dhahaba, dakhala, kharaja. Dhahaba, he went, dakhala, he entered, and kharaja, he left. Now we can see here that the second letter has fatha. And this is one of the most common forms of the verb. However, there is a possibility that the second root letter can have kasra. For example, shariba, he drank, hafidha, he memorized, and fahima, he understood. Now we can see over here that the second root letter can have kasra. And then we have karuma, and this is the least common form of the verb that is used in the Quran or in the Arabic language, where the second root letter has dhamma. So we have karuma, he was noble or he became noble. Kabura, he grew up or he became older. And bauda, it became far or it became farther. So the second root letter in the past tense, it can have fatha, it can have kasra, and it can have dhamma. However, the first radical and the third radical, they are always mabniyun alal fath. They will always end with fatha. So alhamdulillah, today we had introduction to the verbal sentence. First, we had introduction to the verb. Now we have learned about the verbal sentence. And inshallah, now when we start the lesson, inshallah, I'm sure that all the concepts in the lesson will be clear, and we will learn, inshallah, in more a proper way. I ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to make learning easier for us and accept our good deeds. Subhanaka Allahumma wa bihamdika, ashhadu an la ilaha illa ant, astaghfiruka wa atubu ilaik. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.